Es wird Zeit für die letzte Session schon hier im Media Cube. Nach einem langen Tag mit viel Inspiration kommt jetzt Marie Carrothers. Yes, I did it right. Sie wird den Workshop jetzt auf Englisch halten und zwar wird es um VR gehen und Marie ist ein absolutes Multitalent. Passt auf, Leute. Sie hat fürs Fernsehen gearbeitet, sie ist Opernsängerin, sie kann Webdesign und hat pädagogisches Know-how, also eine ganze Menge Skills und ist auch noch Head of VR. Und VR ist in der Regel relativ teuer und super kompliziert und Marie wird uns jetzt zeigen, wie VR easy und mit wenig Aufwand funktioniert. Und wenn ihr wollt, dann wird das Ganze jetzt super interaktiv. Wenn nicht, dann quatscht Marie einfach und ihr hört zu. Ihr habt die Wahl. Dann viel Spaß mit Marie. Dankeschön.
Danke. As our kind host just said, my name's Anne-Marie. I'm currently at the Mozilla Foundation. We have a fun little headquarters here in Berlin, just about a couple miles away. But as he mentioned, my background is actually in performance and the arts. The joke that I tell is that I have been an opera singer turned computer programmer. So I say this about myself so that you know, for this kind of workshop talk we have today, I do not come from a techie background, but I'm very interested in kind of explaining and finding resources and finding links and interconnectivity between the arts and technology to make emerging technologies such as VR as accessible and inclusive as possible. So thank you so much for joining me today. If we get started, perfect. Thank you, Nina. All right, so virtual reality. That was fun and exciting. So virtual reality, you've seen it everywhere today. It has so many possibilities. You can look through a tour of real estate. There's shopping possibilities that you can kind of see yourself in certain outfits. You can visit museums from around the world. You can paint and create. You can create 3D city spaces. Do data visualization, that's actually interesting. Can you imagine going through the numbers at your business in a fun VR way? Of course, video games is one of the most common features of how we're using VR today. Do prototyping, education, mathematics. I think if you had your child do mathematics this way, they'd be a lot easier if they're doing homework. It seems like we could use VR for practically all kinds of purposes. So why doesn't the future look like this today? Why aren't we all walking around in goggles like so many dystopic novels point out? Well, let's look at the background a little bit. Let's see if we're up to, perfect. VR is actually not a new technology. It can be traced back almost 200 years with the Stereoscope created by Sir Charles Weatherstone. Now, what was interesting about this, that much like a lot of the technology that led to motion pictures, the Stereoscope is the first item that had the viewpoint of changing two images, of looking through goggles and having two images of the same image at very different angles, creating a kind of 3D look. This technology went into a lot of different things that we've seen over the for probably about 100 years, 130 years, until the Sword of Damocles was developed in 1968 by MIT. What was differentiated the Sword of Damocles from so many other innovations that we saw in VR in the 130 years was that this was the first time that this device was hooked up to computer-generated images and actually tracked humans' motions and head movement. Nothing really happened until about the 90s, when we finally saw consumer technology and access to VR. The reason things didn't move forward then is, as you can see, the hope of VR far outshot the actual possibilities at the time. As gamer friends of mine who kind of got the first VR set in the 90s can point out that the moment they got their devices on, it was this very, as you can hopefully see, it's this black and red, very grainy, difficult imaging. It wasn't immersive, and most of the time, it didn't really, there was a huge lag. It wasn't, the technology just wasn't there for the consumer aspect. So we kind of ignored VR for the longest time until 2012. Until 2012, where the Oculus Rift Kickstarter, which was, as you know now, bought by Facebook. The reason Oculus Rift, and we've kind of seen this huge spike in VR, is because of a tool that I bet everyone in this room has in their pocket right now. This little guy. Finally, majority of people had an easily accessible mobile device that made this technology a launching pad for the public. So, what do we think is VR's biggest impact today? Anybody have ideas? What is true potential of this technology? Yes? Motion sickness research. Yes, that is a major possibility. Any larger kind of humanitarian look at this technology people want to throw out? One of the exciting elements that I really like and why I want to point out skills and access, especially for non-technical backgrounded folks, is because of empathy. One of the most interesting elements about VR is that it is a completely immersive experience. And with that, we finally have a technology that can literally put you in someone else's shoes, gives you that other person's perspective. How artists, journalists, and activists are already starting to use this is, one example is The Guardian, of showing the experience of what it's actually like to be in solitary confinement, and the symptoms and horrible experience that it truly is. If we can, here. We'll see if the internet's good enough to play this.
Welcome to your cell. You're going to be here for 23 hours a day.
You can be sent to solitary for
disobeying a direct order.
106.10.
Fighting is 90 days extra. Yelling too loud.
Somebody is labeled a gang member.
any kind of drugs.
Looking at a correction officer. Just looking at it.
Having too many rolls of toilet paper is 90 days extra.
Too many postage stamps.
Eating all of your food.
And it's not uncommon to find somebody who's sentenced to a year and then ends up with 5, 6, 7 years in a pile.
After a while, things start to slip.
I find myself floating.
As a psychologist, I can tell you that you are going to undergo many different kinds of reactions, and some of them will be more immediate than others.
You know, you see like the paint on the wall. That paint probably been there maybe 50 years before I got there. So you start seeing figurines.
You know, you think you hear them calling you from the officer station.
The toilet that drips because it sweats and it hits the floor. Choo, 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 choo. Stupid.
People turn on themselves.
They want to treat us like animals. We might as well act like animals.
There are high rates of suicide and self-harm.
People understand is violence. All they understand is a violent reaction. You can't have no diplomacy with this institution.
There are physical and physiological consequences of being deprived of human social contact, so that people's brainwave patterns are altered And certainly people who are in these environments for many months or years on end have to change and transform who they are, and so they're damaged.
I've seen this video so many times, and still, every time, I feel like my heart and my blood pressure go up. This is just one of many examples of how artists, activists, and journalists are using the power of VR to truly put someone in an experience. Because as we've seen with a lot of political and issues in the last few years, people act on emotion. And by putting them in this space, it gives them almost a similar experience and an emotional experience, which pushes people to act and can help push people to act on more activist situations. If I can see. This is the always fun part about putting videos in a presentation, is trying to get back to the technology. Here we go. So further examples can be seen. We've been looking at the refugee crisis, and by placing people in refugee crisis as well as other war zones. One of the most recent examples that I really love is by EFF, which used the power of VR within just a web browser to point out how much surveillance technology is already out in the public that people might not actually be aware of. Another more recent example that, of course, I love from a musical theater background is how theaters can be using this.
More awesome. What? More me. Yeah. All we want to do is hear that sound. All we want to do is hear that sound. Fellas. All we want to do is hear that sound. All we want to do is hear that sound. Yeah. All we want to do is hear that sound. All we want to do is hear that sound. All we want to do is hear that sound. All we want to do is hear that sound.
I will not force you to sit through Beetlejuice the musical. But basically what I wanted to show with this example is that more and more we're looking at these other avenues from a cultural, artistic, and activist perspective. Perfect. This was really exciting for me, especially because I'm very interested to see, in terms of the 360 camera view that can come from VR, how we can be incorporating that into the culture and the arts. So, as you can see, there are tons and tons and tons of examples of how we can be using VR. So why aren't we all wearing goggles right now? Well, it's expensive. Creating apps, creating these materials is extremely time-consuming, as anyone from a development standpoint can tell you. And let's face it, nobody likes walking around with a giant headset over their face. That's why I wanted to come talk about WebVR. So as I will do the terrible thing of reading off a slide while you're presenting, WebVR is an experimental JavaScript API that provides support for virtual reality devices such as Oculus Rift, Google Cardboard, but it's essentially designed in mind for anyone who doesn't have these devices, anyone who isn't a developer background and doesn't want to go or can afford to budget to go create these materials or take extensive training, you now can very easily create an app simply online. The wonderful elements about this is it's open, it's connected, and it's instantaneous. There are several web browsers that, of course, support this already, including, as you can see, Firefox. Still, they're gatekeepers. That's where A-Frame comes in. So in 2015, the Mozilla VR team sat down and decided noticing these huge still blockers and lack of access that, once again, people who have technical backgrounds were the only ones really developing in VR. They developed A-Frame, which declared a framework that allows you to get unlimited access to JavaScript and 3.js while limiting the code to just HTML. Has anyone ever coded a website before? Perfect. All right. So if you've coded a website, it's typically HTML, hypertext meta language, and it's a very basic version of a computer programming language. It's actually usually what people start with in terms of programming. And the reason for that is that it's simply, it's very obvious in what you're creating. And the wonderful thing about A-Frame is that it's even more so in this case. So if you want to see an example of A-Frame, I invite you right now to grab your mobile devices, open a web browser you may have. If you haven't tried Firefox on your mobile, I'd highly recommend it. I promise that is my last shameless plug for the day. And the setup you should see, is you'll notice if you're able to just pull up on your phone or even your device and you start moving around, this element that you're seeing right now was truly created with about 30 lines of code versus the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of others. So the good news is now we're going to get to the fun part. So for those of you that I can see many in the audience who do have a device, I invite you to feel free to follow along for the instructions. For those who do not, I invite you to get comfy with a neighbor and maybe find someone you can look over your shoulder with. The other element I would invite you to is if you go at the very beginning of these slides, I have the resources, which can all be found at bit.ly/VR curriculum. And I can even go back to the beginning to make that easier. Here we are. So here are the resources for today. So the curriculum will take you to my website where you can actually see full lesson plans, more videos, and documentation on how to get started. And then the VR-resources will take you to the materials that we can use today to create our first VR app. All right. So for those who don't have a programming background, I'm going to start with the easier resource, which is a service called roundme.com. Now, the wonderful thing about roundme.com, which I recommend to a lot of educators, is that you can simply pull in a couple of pictures and easily create materials through drag and drop features. If anyone has been using these easy-to-build websites today, like Squarespace or Wix, it's basically that for VR. So if even A-Frame is a little too far ahead, I'd recommend starting with round.me. Not a problem. Here we go. Sure thing. So who is in the Drive folder for the Round Me workshop? One person, two, three, couple. Okay. So feel free to open the PDF document that is the instructions. And I'm happy to demo on my laptop for those who do not have a device that can easily work with this service. Is it safe to change the slide, or people would like a little more time? I'm going to take that as a little more time. All right. So if you go to roundme.com, feel free to click Get Started. Let's see if I can log in. Now I get to do the truly exciting part of every speaker's dream, which is try to type with a German keyboard. Wish me luck. Is there an @ symbol? Yes, is there an @ symbol? Oh, it's right there. Thank you. Correct. For those who are able to log in, feel free to click on Create Tour. So if you're in the Drive folder, which is that bit.ly/vr-resources you'll find, feel free to grab, let's see, should be this Space Cove one. 2 seconds. Should be called image. There we go. All right. Feel free to grab Atlantis Exterior. For those who may not read English, it's just the number 9. You can also feel free to go to Flickr, FLICKR.com, and search for panoramic photos. Here we are. So it's number 9, Atlantis Exterior. Feel free to download that. And then I will simply drag it and drop it into this material. How can we embed it into other websites? Happy to show that once it's done creating. No worries. All right. So you'd asked about embedding. Once you publish it, there's a Pro Embed feature that allows you to get as extreme as you want. But there is a feature. All right. So once you've uploaded that, make sure that you're in editing mode, which is, I'm afraid it's very hard to see, but it's this green pencil at the very top. Just click back. It's a kind of a slider. I'm happy to come help you after the talk if you'd like. All right. So of course, to add other features, you can simply click on, let me add this one. Click on the green cloud button. And it'll automatically create your space. Now, to link to that space, you can do a lot of different things in this element. You can add more information by simply clicking on an eye icon. You could place fun facts about the experience. You can add certain images. You can even link to videos. You can also create what's called a HubSpot. Okay. See. Right. All right. Now, essentially what a HubSpot does, let's try one on this side, is that when you're interacting on your device, it'll automatically, as someone's looking in that direction, provide more information, could automatically open a video, or even take them to more information, or another link, embed video. So the next thing we're going to do is create a portal. Apologies as I'm figuring out why tools are looking different. I apologize. It's all fine. Apologies, let me go to my older version. So with this tool, once you're published, once you have things set up, you can publish it, you can embed it on your site, or you can simply send someone a link. If we even go back, see if I can find my draft. You can see that you can actually place sounds by simply dragging and dropping an audio file. Which you can find in boat2.mp3. Is you can play more with it, is you can set the reach. How far is it? If you do 360, it's truly anywhere they look. You set it 90. It'll have to directly look in that direction. Or we can set it at 180. And that's nice that you can hopefully kind of see that through the blue, it'll show you the entire space that a person would have to be looking to hear it. So we're going to set that up with a loop. And now if we click to view it, hopefully we should hear it. Possibly. And essentially in a very quick couple of steps, by pulling open source materials like music, panoramic images, and embedding links, you can create a 3D tour very quickly. Now let's look back at A-frame. Now A-frame, yes. You do need a panoramic photo. Correct, regular fixtures won't work. So if we look back at A-frame, I invite you all to go to this link. And this should work on any device that you have. For those who went to the mulberry stool earlier, this link will allow you to actually look at and edit my code from earlier. Let's see. I appreciate all of your patience as we work with these technical difficulties. Technical difficulties being Anne-Marie learning how to type on a German keyboard. Just trying to see. Where would I find that symbol? No, you're fine. Where would I find this symbol? Yeah. All right, so you should see this page. And I would select the option to view source. I would click on the views index.html, which will show you all of the code. Can people see okay? I can make this bigger if people would like. Need to make it maybe a bit better? All right. So for those who've never looked at HTML before, essentially what these materials are saying is HTML, which is basically the website, the title, what you want basically the tab to say, and then the script is pulling in the JavaScript, which is what's pulling in directly the A-frame that allow this to make this work. So this is going to be in your head tag, which is, if you've never done programming before, a website is split between a head, a body, and a foot. The head you can think of like your brain. No one really sees your brain because that would be catastrophist. But that is where you know your name, you know your sense of self, and you know how to. Basically your brain is telling yourself what actions to take, is telling your muscles what to do. That's essentially what the head section of a website is doing. It's saying what we want this thing to be called, and it's pulling in JavaScript, which has to do with interactivity on a website, to tell it, here's how we want items on this page to interact and move around. So the next part is the body. And just like ourselves, a body determines, is basically what you're going to see, or what the public sees on a website. The next tag, which, by the way, anything between these kind of arrows is referred to as a tag, is a scene. This is exactly as it sounds. It's just we're setting the stage for our VR app. Next, we have the tag box. Anybody want to guess what that tag will create? It's right, a box. And as you can see, in very plain, unfortunately, English, it's telling it the position, which is our X, Y, and Z coordinates. And then opacity, which means how we want it to show up, how we would like to show it on the page, whether it's fully formed and fully color, or completely disappeared. So the next symbol you can create is those rings, which is called a torus. Now, just like everything else, we have the color, we have the segment tubular, which is just the tube, radius, rotation, and then, of course, position, which is the X, Y, and Z coordinates. Now, all of that is a lot of geometric information that just simply tells where we want this item to be on the page. And as you can see, with basically, as that is line 23, with essentially that, you can copy and paste that many times, change the colors, slightly change the rotation, and you'll quickly develop, as you can see, the Olympic rings. Now once you have that up, let's see. To get started, I would recommend going to aframe.io. From here, it comes with not only a ton of tutorials, but a list of examples that you can see the source and start playing around with how people created this. So here we can see a bunch of very simple images and shapes. Which are simply created with these very obvious tags. You have your scene, which is your background. You have a box, which is a box. A sphere is a sphere, a cylinder, and so on. The only different shape that might not be obvious is what is called a plane, and that is this foreground. A plane is really helpful, especially if you're developing content where people might be walking around, a video game kind of thing, to kind of set the stage and make it obvious for people of how they can interact into the space and kind of like a center of where they're going. So of course that's very basic. But just with about a couple lines of code, you can easily just grab a panoramic image and create these really interactive and engrossing images. This can go on with image galleries, of course, videos I've pointed to a lot. Animation, and then of course going forward with lights and sounds and other materials. Now if you've truly no background, I would highly recommend going to A-Frame School, which is simply exactly as it sounds. Which is truly an interactive course in that you actually have to press keys and whatnot to go through a step-by-step lesson on how to get started, understanding the components, understanding Glitch, which is our text editor for this materials, and so on. For more lesson plans, you can once again go to the resources from the very beginning, bit.ly/VR curriculum, which truly has step-by-step guides to all of these materials. Thank you so much for sitting through this very, unfortunately, tech issue heavy presentation. I do apologize for that, but I greatly appreciate all of your patience. I'm happy to take some questions. I'm happy to look at folks' materials if you have been following along or playing with some of the materials. And of course, I'm happy to speak more about this anytime. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Gibt es denn Fragen von eurer Seite? Are there any questions to Anne-Marie? Yeah.
How do I get a panoramic picture? Do I need a special camera, or can I just take one with my smartphone?
You can just take one with your smartphone. Make sure that you're just in that panorama component. Another helpful tool is called Google Cardboard, which Google has this wonderful feature that actually helps you create a 360 VR experience and will guide you on how slow or quickly you need to go to have the clearest picture possible. and then with an easy link that you can embed into these materials. You also just reminded me another really helpful resource that is part of this presentation, and all of this is on the website. For materials and equipment, VR headsets become extremely inexpensive. And right now you can actually go to an unofficial cardboard as just an example. So it's about 10 to 12 USD, which is probably even less euros, probably around 8 euros. And this was just a few years ago. To be honest, I've seen complete headsets in places like Target. I'm sorry, I don't know the German equivalent of Target, for truly the same price. So there are these interactive headsets that you no longer have to do these paper cardboard versions. But if you are looking for some inexpensive materials, feel free to start there. And the great thing about unofficial cardboard is if you are doing an event or things like that, is they can put your logos or any kind of messaging you'd like. If you don't know how to take a panoramic photo, I would highly recommend just Googling equi-rectangular panoramas. I will try to spell that. EQUI, rectangular panorama. And the difference between a regular panorama and an equi-rectangular panorama is that it has, an equi-rectangular panorama is truly the 360-degree experience versus other kinds of panorama that is just the linear one. Yes, in the back. What about video? That is a very great question. So for video, I would highly recommend the Samsung 360-degree camera, which actually looks very similar to this microphone in that it has a handle and a little ball on the top. And you can get one for less than $100, and even now there's options for less than $50. So the wonderful things about these cameras, not only do they easily hook up to your laptop or even a smartphone if you have the capability, but that they instantly take a 360-degree view of your room, and you can do live streaming, things like that. But it's very inexpensive. I would recommend if you are uploading or using the kind of VR streaming or 360-degree video, you can use YouTube is really set up for this right now. Vimeo is also starting to be great for 360-degree video. But Mozilla also has a space, I believe, in Hubs. So a last great resource, and I apologize that I have yet to add this to the website link, is Firefox Reality. Not only do they have starter kits, but they have spaces for you to be uploading your work, seeing the work of others, and also building off and remixing more materials. Here you can see more guidance on how to build with VR, all the different ways you can experience the materials, and of course, further learning materials. Any other questions?
Wenn es keine Fragen mehr gibt, dann nochmal vielen Dank. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for your input and your workshop. Danke an euch, dass ihr da wart. Das ist jetzt die letzte Session gewesen. Wir sind fertig. We are done for today. Morgen geht es weiter um 10 Uhr hier im Media Cube. Und wir würden uns freuen, euch wiederzusehen. Und wenn ihr gleich draußen was trinkt, nicht vergessen, #MCB, macht tolle Fotos auf Snapchat, Insta, Facebook, Twitter, egal. Postet, was das Zeug hält. Vielen Dank. Ciao.